That's you live, thank you.
Thanks very much. Good morning, members. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of Nithsdale Area Committee, the 8th of September. This meeting is being recorded and the recording will be made available on the Council website for public listening. Can I remind members to follow the good practice guidance, which includes muting microphones and switching off their video when not addressing the meeting. Should you wish to contribute to any item, you should write speak in the Teams chat function and you'll be invited to speak in order about new issues. Should your question or issue be raised by a previous speaker, please withdraw your request so that we deal with the business as efficiently as possible. Usual standing orders apply, including that any votes will be undertaken by roll call. If any member has to leave the meeting for any reason, can I remind you to write leave in the Teams chat function and then join on your return. This will allow us to monitor members' presence. Can I have the sediment and apologies, Tracy, please? And I approve the remote participation of members as listed.
Thank you. Morning, Chair. We've got 15 members present. We've got 2 members present at Council Headquarters, English Street, and 13 present on Teams. I've got 2 apologies from Councillor Davidson and Councillor Hislop, and 1 member not present is Councillor Charteris. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tracy. Members will come to declarations of interest. Does any member, I think Councillor Nicholson has a declaration.
Yeah, declare an interest in item 9 and 10.
Thanks very much, Councillor Nicholson. I have a declaration, members, on agenda item 7. My wife is a committee member on the Sanker Senior Citizens Committee. Therefore, I will step down from that agenda item and ask Tracy Provost to take that particular agenda item. If there are no other declarations of interest, we'll move on to the minute of the previous meeting on the 30th of June 2021 for approval. Members, is this a true record? Oh, Councillor John Bell. Graham.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me, Chair? Item 10, I was contacted by a constituent regarding the traffic order, but maybe I should declare an interest on that subject. It's item 10 from me, Chair.
Thank you very much. That's a declaration of interest for agenda item
on item 10.
And Councillor Bell. Thank you, Graham.
Thank you.
If we've now moved on from declarations of interest, we will come to the minute of the 31st or the 30th of June 2021. I take if there are no hands, that's a true record. Thank you, members. Okay, members, we come on to agenda item number 4. The Scottish Fire and Rescue Service Nithsdale Area Annual Performance Report, 1st of April 2020 to 31st of March 2021. Report by Chief Officer, Restart, Renewal and Recovery. Our first report this morning is Annual Performance Report from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. Scott Irvin and Susan Maxwell are available in Teams to assist members with any questions. So, Scott and Susan, I trust you're with us.
Good morning, Chair. Yes, we are.
Morning, Scott. Morning, Susan. Thanks very much. Members, does anyone have any questions for the Fire and Rescue Service? Councillor Lever, please.
Thanks, Chair. It's page 27. The number of smoke detectors fitted during home fire safeties is 196 in the year. Obviously, new legislation comes into effect as of February next year in terms of every home has to have, by law, interlinked smoke detectors, heat detectors, etc. What effect is that going to have on the budget for the Fire and Rescue Service? Looking at the advice on the internet, just to purchase these alarms for the average house is going to be £220. That's without any fitting fees. So does that have any implication? There's 2.3 million households in Scotland, so that's a huge amount of money which people are going to have to find. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Scott or Susan.
Thank you, Councillor Weaver. I'll pass you over to my colleague Susan Maxwell, and she can go into a bit more detail in relation to your question.
Could you just sort of clarify what the question actually is?
Jeff?
Yeah. There's new legislation coming into effect in February next year about having interlinked smoke detectors and heat detectors, etc. I see on page 27 that you fitted 196 smoke detectors last year. Obviously, they are now redundant as regards to legislation. So what effect is that going to have on the fitting of smoke detectors? It's going to cost £220 just to purchase the interlinked systems.
Well, just to clarify, this is not Scottish Fire and Rescue Services legislation. This comes from Scottish Government.
Yes, I appreciate that.
And Scottish Government have also supplied us with £1 million worth of Wi-Fi smoke detectors. So we are able to fit them in the homes of the most high-risk people in our area who live in their own properties. If they live in rental properties, then it's the landlords who will have to fit the smoke alarms up for them. So the high-risk people, we actually do a check on them to see if they can get the alarms from us, and we'll go out and fit them as usual.
Susan, just to clarify, that sounds to me like fabulous news that doesn't seem to be in the public domain. Are you telling Councillor Lever that Dumfries and Galloway Council, the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service within Dumfries and Galloway have £1 million at their disposal?
No, that's over the whole of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. But what happens is every fire station in Dumfries and Galloway have these Wi-Fi alarms. And if we go to high-risk property that doesn't have these alarms in, then we will fit them in for the people free of charge. However, they do have to be high-risk and they do have to be living in their own properties. So that's a service that the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service carry out on top of all the other services that we carry out just now as well.
So who determines what's high risk, Susan?
It's a questionnaire. It's done on everybody's personal details and that, and it's a questionnaire that's done online, and we'll ask the questions, and then it goes through a matrix and they decide whether it's high risk or not. But there's also other places that people can get funding for this. There's funding through some of the various charities in Dumfries and Galloway who will help out people who can't afford these. So people just have to look and find if they need the help and we can't, they don't fall into high risk category, that there is other areas that they can go to.
Can I come back?
I wouldn't want to labour this, but what about folk that are elderly, vulnerable, that don't have internet connection or access? How do they apply online?
What they can do, they can give us a phone call and we'll fill out all the information for them over the phone. It's a local Dumfries number. They can call us on that if they want to. They can get in touch with the local fire station. They'll fill out the information. So there's loads of different ways, and they don't actually have to have Wi-Fi in their own homes for these alarms to work because they come with their own Wi-Fi systems. So if somebody elderly doesn't have internet, for example, these alarms have their own Wi-Fi systems built into them.
I think it might be helpful, Susan, then, to save us taking up a lot of your time. Could members speak to you offline for further information, or is there an officer dedicated for this particular aspect of the service delivery that you do?
If you go onto the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service main website, all the information is on there, and there's also direct links to the Scottish Government's website as well, and that'll give you all the information you need there. However, if any of the councillors want to speak to me directly, then just contact me at Dumfries Fire Station. I'll be more than pleased to speak to them.
Superb. Thanks very much, Susan. I've got a couple of members wanting to speak to you now. I've got Councillor McKee and then Councillor Martin. Councillor McKee, please.
I've withdrawn my hand, Chair. I'll get my question answered on the internet.
Thanks very much, Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair. It's just on a follow-on for Jeff. On page 27, with 375 home fire safety visits were carried out, do we envisage there'll be an awful lot more? Because I've only a rough idea what I need, like would the public be able to get in touch to find what they actually need in their house?
Like I say, all the information is on a direct link to the Scottish Fire and Rescue Services page to Scottish Government. That gives you every single bit of information there. However, we do have printed information sheets as well. And if you want to email me your address, I can send you some out. I
actually went on. I've been on the website, and it's not that clear of what you actually need, really. As I say, with the amount, I'm not sure if I need 3 or if I need 4. And going through the website, it doesn't make it really clear.
Yeah.
Let's see, I can send you a printed information sheet out, or you can give me a phone call and we can discuss it off table.
Aye, that's fine, Susan. That's fine, Susan.
Susan, could you please send that printed sheet to our governance officer, Tracy, and Tracy could circulate it to all members of the committee, please, because there's also some absent today. If that's possible, and if Tracy isn't the right person, I'm sure she'll forward the sheet to the appropriate member of staff to circulate it to all Nithsdale Area Committee members. Thanks very much for that offer, Susan.
That's not a problem. I'll send that through.
Thank you very much. Any other questions on that particular aspect, the home fire safety and the new fire alarms? If not, I have one other, just a question, and it's on page 23. And I know the text at the end of this report actually explains it a bit, but unintentional injury or harm in Midden-Upper Nithsdale, there was 17 cases. Is that where people were actually injured during incidents that were not necessarily fires in that last reporting period, Susan?
The majority of them are. I mean, we're involved with the ambulance service a lot to go into people's homes and help them if they fell, etc. So the majority of those are actually what that is.
That's fine, thank you. It just seemed a strange thing, unintentional injury, but fine, thank you for that. Leader, Elaine?
Thanks, Jim. It was on page 26. Nith ward has another undesirable record of being way ahead of everybody else. All the other wards and unwanted fire alarm signals by ward area. Now, I just wonder, is it sale premises, or is there sort of an explanation behind why Nith's ward is so much higher than everywhere else?
Sorry. Yes, please. Yeah. So, thank you for your question, Councillor Murray. In relation to your point, I think the issue that Nith suffers from is obviously a lot of it's to do with the position of the hospital in relation to the ward that obviously sees a lot of activity, which obviously has a direct impact on those figures. So that's why we maybe are predominantly higher in comparison to other wards. And obviously we have, that's, Susan made a valid point there. Obviously we combine that with the number of schools we have in the area as well. So we potentially see a disproportionate, number of incidents as a consequence.
I'm not sure I really understand the point about the hospital, since the hospital is an Abbey ward.
Oh, so it is actually. Oh, sorry. Sorry, you're right. Sorry, it's a valid point. I take back that point. As you can. So sorry, just find the part in the report.
It's on page 30 of. So I don't know, in your report it's page 10, I think.
Page 10. That's just looking for. So you're looking at the incidents in upper, so in Nithsdale, so obviously you're looking at the 86.6.
That's right, 86.6 per 100,000. Sorry, 10,000 of the population.
Mm-hmm.
is a lot ahead of everywhere else. I just wondered if there's an issue with it. It's about, you know, the numbers of shops that retail premises and whatever.
Obviously, I think what we see is obviously in relation to the Nith ward is obviously it's the main centre of population within Dumfries and Galloway. So obviously the vast concentration of our population is centred around the Nith area, the Nith ward, as is so most of our shops and facilities and services are around that area. So I think what we see there is a reflection of that mass being congregated in one geographical area. And obviously, as we look across the other wards, then you see a very different picture. But I think it's down to the population demographics within the wider area.
Yeah, but the population of Nith ward is much the same as North West and so on. And the wards' boundaries are set to similar populations. So it's still well above, for example, North West or Abbey. I mean, North West is a similar population. It's far from unwanted fire alarm signals.
If you'd like a breakdown of these areas, I can supply that to you by email, and then you can have a look at it yourself if you'd like that.
Yeah, I would certainly be interested to see that. If there's something that obviously is causing a problem to the fire service, to be honest, and, you know, if we can understand, maybe try and understand why that is.
Thanks, Leader, and thanks again for that, Susan. That's really helpful. Whilst we wait to see if there are any other members with questions, I see on page 32 your report in front of me. I don't know which number it'll be in front of you. There were 4 youths traced following a spate of fires in Sanker, 2 more youth following fire malicious calls in Locher Briggs. I take it that when you say these youths are traced, that they're then reported to the police for the police to deal with. It's not just a case of finding out who they are and that becomes the end of that matter. I know the police can't answer and you can't answer for the police. It's just a question that the information that you ascertain will be passed on.
We work very, very closely with the police in all areas of Dumfries and Galloway, and especially so in Dumfries. I don't think there's a day goes by where I don't speak to my other colleagues in the police force. So we do work together. We do joint patrols with the police in various areas where we do know there's deliberate fire setting going on, and due to our sort of very good joint working with them, you can see from the figures that we do get people who end up getting arrested because of our work together. And also we run a fire setters intervention programme as well for those that are under 16. So they'll be found guilty of these sort of crimes with the police, but they can't obviously be charged because of their age. So they come to myself and my team, and we run an intervention programme with them here in Dumfries and Galloway. And so far in the past sort of 5 years that I've been doing it, not one of these people that we've run the intervention programme with has went on to light any more fires. So they certainly don't get just sort of left in the wayside.
And is that across Nithsdale, not just in Dumfries?
Across Dumfries and Galloway.
Aye, super, aye. Okay.
Yep.
Thanks, Susan. Okay, members, if we are happy with the responses we've had and there are no other questions, we are asked to scrutinise the performance report for Nithsdale from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service for the period 1st of April 2020 to 31st of March 2021, detailed in appendices 1 and 2. Thanks for that, members. That concludes agenda item 4. Move on to agenda item 5, which is the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service's Nithsdale Quarterly Performance Report, 1st of April 2021 to 30th of June 2021. And again, Scott and Susan are with us if members have any questions on this particular report. I'm open to questions for members, please. Councillor McKee, please.
Thanks, Chair. There's one at the top of page 40. Accidental fires remain relatively stable over the last 4 years. However, dwelling fires in the reporting period show a marked increase over 50%. Could you give us an idea exactly what that is? Another one was that causes a great deal of concern as far as I'm concerned is the fire of the disability sports equipment. Were these people caught and were they dealt with appropriately? Your appropriate might be different from mine, but I'll take your word for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKee. I'll let Susan answer your second question first, probably easier.
Yeah, with regards to the David Keswick Centre, yes, the people involved that actually came forward and they went to the police, so the police are dealing with those.
Thank you, Susan. So, in relation to your first point, there has been a marked increase, obviously in terms of accidental dwelling fires, up from 5 last year to 11, and again that's obviously the highest number we've seen within the last 5 years. You'll notice though that obviously those instances, that increase has been spread across all the wards in the Nithsdale area. I think it's what we're seeing is obviously partly influenced by the pandemic. Obviously, we have seen people, being at home more often. So our figures, and it's really hard to get an accurate picture on figures because last year and this year have been like no other year. So that has had an impact in skewing our figures slightly. Obviously, the likelihood is the more time people are at home, there is obviously going to be a greater potential for an increase in accidental fires. I think that's a fair assessment of more people being in the home. So I think that's partly why we see that increase. Obviously, you'll see there that the good news is obviously, whilst there has been an increase in fires, we are seeing a greater number of properties being covered by smoke detection. So that's obviously offering the residents of those properties early warning, which is allowing them to obviously to evacuate the premises much quicker. That's allowing us to be alerted much quicker and respond. So obviously the damage to the properties and to the individuals is reduced. So whilst we may be seeing an increase in the first quarter of this year, the impact of that increase isn't being passed on to the individuals within those properties. And you'll see there's only one casualty because of those increases in fire. So that whilst we're seeing a spike in accidental dwelling fires, we're not seeing the associated increase in injuries as a result of that.
Thanks for that, Jay. And I think we've gone through very difficult times over the last year or so, and I suppose some of these things are to be expected. But thanks very much for your answers.
No worries.
Thanks, Councillor McKee. I see Councillor Ferguson moved away for 5 minutes, but I'm looking for other speakers. If there are none, the considerations are the local plan, and the local plan outlines its priorities the police service have done in 3.2. We are asked to scrutinise the performance report for Dumfries and Galloway from the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service period 1st April 2021 to 30th of June 2021, detailed in the appendix. If members are happy with that, we will support and accept both these recommendations. And thanks, Scott and Susan, very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thanks very much for your support, and we'll look forward to receiving the information you've volunteered to send along, Susan. Thanks very much indeed.
Problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Okay, members, we move on to agenda item number 6. Nithsdale Area Committee Discretionary Budget 2021-22, which includes the update on Christmas lights, COVID-19 Renew and Recovery Budget, and remaining 2021-22 discretionary budget report by Community Planning and Engagement Manager. The next report provides members an update on the Christmas lights priority for this committee, and members will be asked to agree a further verbal update from officers. We are also being asked to consider and agree on how we wish to allocate the funding allocated to the COVID-19 Renew and Restart budget, which members will recall it was agreed at a June meeting to consider this further at a later stage when the COVID-19 situation had become hopefully somewhat clearer. And finally, we've been asked to consider and agree how we wish to allocate the remaining discretionary budget, which amounts to just over £6,000 to £8,000. We have with us Derek Hexland and Mike Fox to assist with our discussions. And I'd first like to take us to recommendation 2.1, which is agreed to receive a verbal update from road service colleagues to update on the 21 Christmas light contract as detailed in paragraph 3.5, 3.7. And then if we're content with this, we'll invite Mike to give members an update on the Christmas light So Derek and Mike are with us. Do either of you have anything to add to the report before we go to the update from Mike?
Nothing from me,
Derek?
Chair, nothing to add.
And Mike, no, okay. Okay, Mike, it's up to you. Can you update members, please, on where we are with the securing a contract on the Christmas lights and the other issues that were identified that we asked you to look into, including lights for all columns we are fixing on them, and a competition with the school children, bearing in mind it's getting late in the day for that particular function to take place. But Mike, over to you, please.
Chair, good morning, everyone. The update on the current contract and the tender process. The tender documents were issued and available for bidders. We had 4 submissions from bidders. The due date for submission was the 27th of August. And due to additional questions coming in from bidders, we actually had to extend the closure date by a couple of days. So where we are at the moment is the bids actually are based on quality and price, and the quality element has to go through the initial assessment. That has just been completed by ourselves. What happens now is that then goes to our procurement colleagues to do some mathematics with that and the actual prices submitted by the bidders, and they will then advise on who they deem to be the most economically advantageous bidder for the works. Timescale wise, at the moment, I'm not cited, and that's purely for procurement reasons. I'm not cited on the actual prices. I only get involved with the assessment of the quality submission. To say that's been completed, and the advice I've been given is that we should be in a position to have an identified bidder, our preferred bidder, probably early part of next week. Now, as regards timescales, the timescales are tight, but there is still adequate time to allow the school competition to take place, and for the manufacture and erection of the motifs that the 4 successful pupils will have. I think that there was and confirmed that all the bidders were asked to have their submissions based on a supply and erection of all the lights by mid to late November. Okay, so that would give adequate time for all this to be completed. There was a request that all lighting columns that have a switching unit on them would have a motif on them, and that's currently the case. That's how the documents were issued. There are a substantial amount of columns that are part of the bid are actually on Trunk Road, so they are actually owned and maintained by Amy Transport Scotland, but the arrangements are well versed and used between ourselves and the Trunk Road operator to allow us to do any necessary works to replace switching units should they be required. So I've not got any concerns there in relation to achieving that. That's really where we are at the moment. I think again, maybe jumping ahead, there may be given the timescales, once I have the full information, I'm more than happy to provide an update to members on the the preferred bidder and the associated costs with that once we have the fullest detail.
Thanks, Mike. I think that leaves us with a couple of minor problems. Whilst you can send us the information when you get it, we have a decision to make today because we don't meet again until December. And by that time, we'd expect the whole process to have been carried forward on our behalf by you as the roads asset manager or roads manager. Can we be confident that the £57,560 will be sufficient? Because if we're at procurement, as members, we don't know yet what that figure is. That's delegated to officers. It would be challenging for us to revisit this later without additional issues such as having to meet again or delegating to officers or whatever. And that would be a route that I think members would prefer not to go down. We'd like to know if that's possible, that this 57.5k will be adequate for everything that you've outlined today.
Thanks, Chair. Based on the prices that we worked with last year, which was, and I covered at the last committee, was a one-off arrangement. It was a sole supplier arrangement. And by the very nature of that type of situation, you tend to pay a bit more in that type of situation. And looking back to what the prices were in place for the previous contract, I've got a high degree of confidence that that figure that's available will be able and adequate.
Thanks, Mike. Members, do we have any questions for Mike? It seems a very encouraging report. It seems we will be able to achieve all we're looking for. And it would seem that the contract, if we authorise Mike to progress today, will be imminently signed. And we can look forward to Christmas motifs in the communities again as usual. Members, any questions? Or are we just simply happy to approve the allocation of £57,560 as set out in paragraph 3 of the report?
Agreed.
Okay, Mike, we can rely on you to progress that, including the schools competition, and we look forward to seeing. I take it you will share with members not only the name of the contractor, but in the past, and I'm happy if it's not the case this time, some motifs were of a standard variety and only a proportion were the ones designed by the schools. But if the whole community in Kirkconnell, Sanker, Thornhill and Dumfries design the lights for the whole of the stretch, I'm happy with that as well, and I guess members would be as well. I suppose the question is, who eventually selects the motifs? Would that be the elected members for each of the wards that are covered?
Sorry, Chair, is this for the school competition?
Yes, aye.
I'm open to suggestions, to be honest, on that one. I think the last time, because I wasn't actively involved, but I think the last time it was possibly carried out by officers, I think.
I think Councillor Martin was present the last time, along with another elected member, so that it was a joint decision. Okay. And the last time, the children's motifs were in the centre of the towns or villages, and there were standard motifs. That would be the arrangement made with the contractor. Whether it's different this time or no, I'm content either way. But I think it would be nice if members had some input into the selection of design. You don't want a committee to turn up, but maybe one or two members meeting with officers just to go through the motifs to select the eventual motifs for the individual.
Yeah, happy to accommodate that, yeah.
Fine. So, I mean, members will discuss that. I would imagine the provost and I'm happy to whoever else has a look at that and does that with you or in conjunction with some of your team to select the motifs once we get the scheme underway. Otherwise, I think I'd be more than content with what you're doing, Mike. Thanks for that. Okay. Members, are we happy that Mike's delegated to progress with the contract, proceed with the schools competition, and that once the competition has been brought to a conclusion, the provost and one other member meets with Mike and whoever it might be to decide on the eventual motifs that are created?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thanks for that. Okay. Mike, it seems like that's in hand. Okay. Thank you very much, and thanks for being here today. We look forward to every one of us hearing from you in relation to confirmation that the contract has been signed and that the schools competition is underway, and you can circulate to members. Maybe the leader would want to be along with the provost to decide which the motifs we eventually select. It would be helpful, and then we'll just carry on after that. So members are happy the leader and the provost decide on the motifs?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much. That you've got your two elected members, Mike, and whoever else to decide on the motifs.
Perfect.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, members.
Thanks, Jeff.
That moves us on to the expression of interest for the COVID-19 restart budget as detailed in paragraph 3.8 to 3.12, and delegate decisions to the lead officer, discretion of budget in consultation with local ward members. Derek, you're with us on this, and this is the process that took place last time we did the renew restart. So members, again, I'm in your hands. It seems to me a reasonable approach. On 3.8, it indicates the budget of £19,020 for renew and restart activities. You have the officers aware of the groups and organisations that would benefit from access to small amounts of funding at 3.9, and it sets out the kind of qualifying criteria the officers would use in relation to the receipt of any applications for that funding. And 3.10 requests your direct link to allow the applicant to restart previous activity or respond to direct costs associated with government guidance. And 3.11, in order to respond to recalls for small amounts, members might want to open expression of interest for up to 1k, similar as 2020, and delegate decisions to the lead officer, which would be Derek, in consultation with a local ward member, something that worked well last time round. That is the proposal. I'm happy to leave that to members to decide. I see someone typing. I don't YH. It doesn't say yes or no, but meetings chat have started. Someone started typing. Oh, leader, please.
Wasn't actually me that was typing at that point, so I'm not. Maybe somebody else was typing too. But I think in terms of what happened the previous time, I felt a bit dissatisfied with, because I felt we got these expressions of interest and we didn't really have much in the way of criteria to judge them against. So we were basically saying that we didn't see any reason why they should not get the money, rather than that they fulfilled the particular criteria. So I would be quite content with 3.11 so long as we have some indication that those criteria suggested from the feedback are applicable to those particular. I'd want to see the applications, supporting some of these criteria, and not just saying, well, we want 100,000, we want £1,000 for sanitisers, and just leaving it at that. So I want to see some sort of assessment when it comes to elected members of the expressions of interest in terms of those different criteria, and also an assessment of whether or not the organisation has previously had restart money and whether or not it actually used that restart money, because I have a suspicion that some organisations bought in a whole load of hand sanitizer and then lockdown came back and they never managed to use it. So there'd be no reason for them to have to buy any more PPE if they haven't used the stuff that they've already got. So I'd just like to see a bit more rigorous than it was the last time.
Derek, you want to respond to that, because that's very constructive, and I think leader's absolutely right. Whilst they're modest amounts, they still should be used in an appropriate way, and no just simply apply for it because the money happens to be available.
Yeah, through you, Chair, absolutely right. And thank you, Leader. The previous process was more aligned to the Strategic Renewal, Restart and Recovery Plan, which, as members all will be aware, is quite a high-level strategic document. So trying to align local village halls and such like their restart activities was a challenge, and we did the best we could. And then, as members are aware, we did then go back into lockdown. But some of that funding did allow community councils, community organisations to buy digital equipment that allowed them to continue their meetings and such like. But absolutely, if members are content with the soundings of the criteria that officers have made at 3.9, or if they want to remove anything or add anything, Chair, then that's absolutely within the delegation of the committee to do that. And officers, if it's delegated to officers, would then scrutinise the expression of interest that came in against these set criteria. And if the leader's proposing there that we also put in, if they've previously, they would be ineligible if they previously applied for the COVID-19 Renew Start budget, then we can absolutely add that as well. But in your hands, Chair.
I think the leader was saying that sometimes it wasn't used. We wouldn't have wanted to bar anyone because they may well apply for something different. Leader, do you want to just respond to that last point?
Yeah, my suggestion wasn't really that an organisation should be ineligible if it had money before, but I would want to see an assessment of what they'd had it for and whether they'd actually been able to use it for that.
Yeah, and I think that's due diligence, Derek, something we'd expect you to do. We wouldn't want to deny anyone the opportunity to ask for support. We just want to make sure that it's used appropriately when it's allocated, and no a repeat application just to add to a group's resource. It should actually be used for renew and restart, as the report says.
My apologies for that, Chair, for that misunderstanding. Of course, there will be monitoring comes back from all these projects we have got funding up until now. So in the previous round, there will be monitoring comes back to let us know how they've spent it. So absolutely, that due diligence will be there. Will ensure that nobody comes back in for even more hand sanitizer if they've already had it, unless there's a justifiable reason as to why they may want more. And again, recommendations would come to ward members, local ward members from local groups who may have more local intel than what the lead officer may have, or the local ward officer, and we would rely on that feedback to come to a final decision, Chair.
Thanks, Derek. Members, the leader has come up with a suggestion. It seems to me eminently sound. Derek has given or provided some assurance that due diligence will be applied, and I am sure we all want to see the support being made available as soon as practicable. Any other members wish to contribute? If not, I'll ask Derek just to repeat what the members have decided, and then we'll move on to the next agenda item. So, Derek, we have decided to...
Yep, so we're going to open for expressions of interest and delegate authority to myself as lead officer to make the final allocations, but we're going to base it on the criteria outlined in 3.9. And we'll also have an eligibility criteria that says that you can't apply for items you've previously applied for without further justification of need. And can I just confirm, Chair, that we're looking to open for up to £1,000?
I think that's the intention, Derek. I would say yes, unless the leader or members say otherwise. It leaves an opportunity for a number of organisations to get a small boost rather than maybe one or two get a significant amount. It may be that other organisations are looking for more, in which case you might be able to refer them to the discretionary element, provided members decide on that next. But I would suggest that the leader is thinking that a limit of £1,000 would be reasonable to allow as many organisations as we can get a bit of support from the Nithsdale Area Committee.
Thanks, Chair. And we'll also obviously include the monitoring arrangements that are required so that we can give feedback on how the benefits that they've had from this fund and what it's allowed them to achieve.
That's great, Derek. And aside from the normal communication with local ward members, you will bring a report in December outlining how that money was distributed so that members can have an oversight, and it might well guide us at some time in the future or guide the next committee based on how the outcome of this exercise plays out. Okay, yes, thanks very much for that, members. That brings us to the third element of this particular report, which is the remaining discretionary budget. There's £68,067.71 remaining. The options are set out again in the paper on 314. We could open a small grants fund for up to 2k. We could open for all applications, or we could retain this fund and take it forward to the next financial year or to the new council when it is recreated or reformed in May next year. Again, members, I'm in your hands. You see the office recommendation and the suggestions, and I'll wait and see if anyone has any proposals, Derek. In the absence of any proposal, I would say we should just simply go with the recommendations that you as our lead officer has set out, whereby I wouldn't want personally to see this budget carried on to next year. It would seem a shame when there's an opportunity to support organisations, especially as Councillor McKee has already alluded to, the particular challenges that we've all faced in this particular year with COVID-19. So if we can support organisations in some way, I'd be keen to do that. I'd be keen to see this fund used. And there's also a thought that after it, you might not have been privy to it, Derek, but there was a debate at the Fire and Rescue Service report about the legal requirement placed on individuals to have new fire safety equipment in their homes. And there was a thought that maybe the Fire and Service Rescue organisation could be alerted to this budget and they might want to submit an application, and it's a thing that I feel quite a number of folk will be sympathetic to. But again, that's out with my control as chair. That's up to members. I've got Councillor McKee followed by the leader. Councillor McKee.
Thanks, Chair. No, I was just wondering, at 68,000 at 2,000 each, that's 34 applications you're looking for. I don't know whether that's too much to expect or not. Can I suggest that we up to £5,000? I don't know how the other members will feel about that, but it's just a suggestion. See what the other members think. But I would suggest up to £5,000 might be more appropriate.
Okay, I wouldn't want to start a bidding war about how much we go up to, but I'm happy to have that as a debate, Councillor McKee, absolutely. It may be that we simply allow officer discretion and base a £2,000 with a higher amount provided on the merits of the application or the applicant themselves. Leader?
Just coming back on your suggestion regarding the smoke alarms, I know that Handyvan were making an inquiry about, because they were quite interested in fitting the smoke alarms, and they made inquiries because they thought the council had been allocated money for it, but in fact it wasn't. It was the money had been allocated to Care and Repair Scotland, and for them to allocate to care and repairs across the country. The total for that was something like £500,000, which quite frankly I don't think that's going to touch the sides of the costs, given that we saw in the fire services report that it costs about £220, average of £220 a household, and householders are they are actually legally obliged to fit these. I just wondered whether there's a possibility with some of this for organisations also like Handyvan to be able to apply for funding to help them to assist particularly elderly or vulnerable people. I mean, we have in our region many elderly people who live in their own homes but might struggle to find a couple of £100 to fit a fire alarm, to buy the fire alarm equipment, never mind to be able to fit it in their home. The only thing I would say is that a small grants fund for up to £2,000 might not be a great deal of assistance to either the fire service or indeed to Handyvan, actually, to enable them to tackle the problems that there might be from the introduction of this legislation.
Thanks for that, Leader. It may be that we would choose to set aside a specific sum from, or ring fence it from, the discretionary budget and leave the remainder open to applications from the Nithsdale area, and Handyvan or whoever would have to give an absolute guarantee that any installation would be in the Nithsdale area. Councillor Nicholson?
I didn't put my hand up, but I will speak if that's okay.
I was David Stitt then, I just guessed it was you.
We're actually in the main hall, Jim, ourselves, but seeing as how you're given the opportunity, just backing up what the leader says, I think that, if you do count it down, £1 million over Scotland isn't an awful lot. When it comes down to Dumfries and Galloway, it'll be about 90,000. And the fire service has done 135 home visits in the first 3 months, and 120 of them were classed as either vulnerable or medium at risk. So that's over a 3-month period. So if you do your maths in that, and it does cost actually more than £250. I've fitted some of them. So you wouldn't get masses out of it. I think maybe 300, 400 households a year. So I think any support that can be given to that I'm quite sure would be welcome. It's not, you can get the fire alarms, heat alarms, carbon monoxide alarms, but they are very expensive, and you need, even if you buy them, the ones that get fitted interlinked by mains, they're a bit cheaper, but then you've got to pay somebody to actually fit that as well. So I think any help on that basis would be welcomed.
Thanks very much, Ronnie. I take it David Stitt is looking to speak then.
Cheers, Chair. Up 1314. I'd rather just leave it £2,000 and what other members are saying, maybe ring fence some money for other organisations to get access for likes of fire detectors.
Thanks very much, David. Councillor Ferguson?
Fine, Jim. I'm just casting my mind back here. I actually thought area committees were funders of last resort. So it's if I would be suggesting that you can't argue against the rationale of helping people who can't afford to put a fire alarm in. God, that's not what I'm saying. But should we be putting money in right at the very start, or should we be waiting to see if there's a shortfall and then putting money in? Then we're a funder at last resort, not just coming straight in because we think it's a good idea very early in the process. Effectively for me, it lets others off the hook who've maybe already been funded, and it's interesting. What I picked up for the fire officer earlier was they're working with the most vulnerable people in their own homes. Anybody who's in a rented house, it's the landlord's responsibility to know the persons. So we need to be really careful how we do this. Whilst I agree entirely with the principle, but just remind us we are the funder of last resort, not first resort.
Thanks, Andy. The only observation I would make is it depends what you want to do. I remember many years ago, the Nithsdale Area Committee funded lights on bikes. We bought lights and gave them to the police to do training on kids' proficiency, and as a reward gave them lights. And that wasn't a last resort. It was felt that it was an initiative that we could support as an area committee rather than just not do anything at all. The police didn't have the funds to do it. No one else seemed to be willing to pick up the baton. So we, as an area committee, stepped up and decided that we would fund. So I understand exactly what you're saying, but it shouldn't debar us from making the decision in certain circumstances that we feel might be unique. But I'm no looking for an argument with it. I'm happy, I'm open to members, and if we have to go to a proposal and a counter proposal, then that's what we'll do. But at the moment, the leader has suggested that we support this to a degree. David Stitt has agreed to set a proportion of the funds aside. I'm absolutely open to whatever members want to do. And I suppose in the Derek, could you, if we were to set aside a sum, whatever that sum might be, we'll say £20,000 for argument's sake, could you then liaise with the fire service and ensure that any or handy van, because the leader quite rightly pointed out they were actually keen to work in our area. They do work for us. We support the handy van scheme anyway. Could we somehow guarantee that only the most vulnerable or people with real challenges in their lives, whether it be their own health or their finances, could be supported in this way? It would be not something you'd means test, but some mechanism that you could agree with the handy van folk that we could establish who it would be appropriate to support and who it wouldn't, rather than just on a first come, first served basis. Is that something that could be either through partnership or the police or whoever it might be? I'm just keen to see that if we do set money aside, it reaches the most vulnerable rather than folk that simply want to take advantage of it, because that would be the case, I think, with most people in society. We'd all want to see ourselves living in a safe, secure environment.
Yeah, through you, Chair. What we would need to do in terms of the process to allow this to take place, Nithsdale Area Committee obviously may set their priorities. So at this moment in time, discretionary budget can only be set on those priority areas. So that was your Christmas festivities, your Christmas lights, your planting, etc. We could agree today a new priority for fire safety, for example, allocate a specific budget, and you can specifically name the organisations you want to do that. Chair, you'll recall we do that for the Riding of the Marches, for example. We can specifically name organisations we want to allocate funding to, and you can go to the detail of allocating a specific budget to those organisations as well, if that's what members wish. So you could go 50-50 between the fire service and handy van, for example, or you may leave it open, that particular budget, for expressions of interest, where we could obviously have conversations with local partners who may be interested in submitting an expression of interest. And the process would kick in again around, if we receive more expressions of interest than what we've got budget for, it would need to come back to committee for a decision. Within that allocation of the budget, we could absolutely set criteria that we're looking for it to be based on need, and absolutely only within the Nithsdale area, Chair.
Yeah, and we could as well debar applications from social landlords on the basis that they have a civic duty or a duty to their tenants. So that would limit the amount of commitment we would make. Councillor Nicholson did want to speak, but you've obviously covered the point he wants to make. So that's an option open to members, and you have heard from our officer that it's something that Derek could quite easily do. We simply add another priority area and delegate the officers to deal with that. So members, I'm open to suggestions. The report doesn't say that. The report just simply suggests up to 2K, and we've agreed the criteria. It's already set. Any alternative, then if no. Councillor John Campbell.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm just happy to go with the recommendations. I mean, I understand where other councillors come from when it comes to fire alarms. But I mean, there's probably more than just the fire service and the handy van. There are probably other groups out there that, could apply for this and utilise it for the same purpose. So, I mean, the report clearly states, that it's open to everybody to apply for this discretionary budget, and I'm quite happy to go with the report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, to bring this to a conclusion then, is that a formal proposal?
Yes.
Okay, do you have a seconder?
I'm happy to second.
Thanks, Andy. Are there any counter proposals? In that case, we have agreed to go with Chair.
Sorry, Chair. Ronnie Nicholson wants to speak, please.
Ronnie.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in the home and I haven't got a button to make you aware. That's why there's a delay. I think what the leader says about, I understand where Andy and John's coming from, but the thing is that if you look at the figures for the fire service, they're not going to have enough money to do that, and they do work with other partner organisations, and Handy Van does, visit the most vulnerable people. So if they got a sum of money, for example, then the fire service wouldn't have to spend that money in that area. Therefore, they would then have others to do that, because there is a big shortfall in the funding to the fire service for the area, and that's just looking at their own figures of vulnerable people that visiting. So I think you flung in a figure, and I know you didn't make it a hard and fast figure of that 68,000. I mentioned a figure of 20,000. I think that would be quite a good start, for that to come off the funding to be used in that kind of purpose. So I'll propose that as an additional recommendation.
Thanks very much, Ronnie. Councillor Lever.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'd be happy to second Ronnie's proposal. I mean, it's fairly clear from the response I got from the fire and rescue that we are going to be strapped to supply all of these. There's only £1 million made available right across Scotland to the fire and rescue service. So, on a per capita basis, that would be around about 30 grand to cover all of Dumfries and Galloway. So there's going to be a big shortfall. So I'm happy to second Ronnie's proposal of the £20,000 being set aside specifically for this and for the most vulnerable.
Thanks very much, Jeff. Leader.
Yeah, I was trying to get in as well, on the same lines as Ronnie. I think not necessarily. I mean, I wouldn't expect it to be social landlords or whoever applying for the money. Landlords are responsible for the equipment in their properties, but organisations now, whether it's the fire service, whether it's handyman, whether in fact it's care and repair, who are getting the allocation from the Scottish Government, and it's actually only £500,000, which I think would probably means they'll only get about 15k, which won't get terribly far at all, to allow organisations to ensure that the most vulnerable people are able to access this equipment. I mean, obviously, people like care and repair and handyman would probably, and the fire service would fit the equipment themselves, but enables them to purchase the equipment where people are actually unable to purchase the equipment for themselves or need for themselves. So I would support Councillor Nicholson's proposal that we ring fence 20k for fire safety.
Thanks very much. In that case, before we go to the vote, the leader has mentioned care and repair. Ronnie has mentioned handy van. The fire service has been mentioned. I can imagine the other organisations, and I can think of Connell and Kilhome Development Trust, that might want to invest in their own communities with financial support from us. So I wouldn't want to restrict the application to this fund by naming individual organisations, but simply organisations who have the necessary qualifications or organisational skills to deliver which then wouldn't preclude. I don't say Kirkconnell and Kilhome Development Trust would want to do that, but I'd hate to deny them the opportunity if there is a fund available and if they were willing to. You never know, they might be able to draw down match funding and invest in their own local community. That's a possibility that they would be able to explore given the opportunity. So it's not about Kirkconnell and Kilhome Development Trust. I'm just anxious to see that we don't restrict the opportunity to national organisations, and I don't know whether the mover and seconder might want to reflect on that. I see Councillor Nichols is wanting to speak. Ronnie, please.
Yeah, Chair. These, I think, both the leader and myself and Jeff, these were examples of organisations that worked in the communities and worked with the fire service as well. You know, so that there's not any duplication, which he couldn't do because once he inspected the places, then it's quite obvious they've got it or not.
Thanks, Ryan. No, it wouldn't be as much an inspection. An organisation could go to the fire service and say, how much can we give you, provided you install them in a particular street or a particular community. Jeff Lever, please.
Yeah, I think all we need to say is it isn't open to individuals to apply for. It has to come through an organisation. Otherwise, we'd be absolutely swamped with people who think, well, I can just get this pipeline to that particular granting. So it has to come through an organisation rather than individual.
Yeah, a bona fide organisation.
Yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, if Ronnie's happy with that addition to his motion, Tracy, can you remind us what the motion amendment is, please, and take us to the vote?
Thank you, Chair. So a motion is proposed by Councillor Campbell, seconded by Councillor Ferguson, to agree, as per 2.3 in the report, to open for expressions of interest for the remaining discretionary budget as detailed in paragraph 3.4 and delegate decisions to the lead officer, discretionary budget in consultation with ward members. And the amendment proposed by Councillor Nicholson, seconded by Councillor Lever, is to agree a new priority today for fire safety and to ring-fence £20,000 from the remaining discretionary budget, to have eligible criteria set to ensure that the most vulnerable are supported, and to open this up to organisations only, excluding landlords from applying. I'll just check with Derek if that's sufficient for this.
The only other thing would be what we're wanting to do with the remaining budget.
Yeah, I think that's the point I was going to make. We also need to add to Councillor Nicholson's motion that the remaining £48,067.71 will be applied as per 3.14 of the report. If that's right, Ronnie and Jeff, I'd be happy with.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, happy with that. Okay,
so just add that to the end of the motion, please, Tracy, that the remaining budget will be dealt with as in the officer's recommendation at 3.14.
Okay, that's fine, Chair, thanks. So I'll proceed to the vote.
Thank you.
Chairman?
Amendment.
Vice Chair?
Motion.
Councillor Bell?
Motion.
Councillor Blake? Councillor Blake? Come back to Councillor Campbell?
Motion.
Councillor Ferguson?
Motion.
Councillor Johnson?
Motion.
Councillor Lever?
Amendment.
Councillor Martin?
Amendment.
Councillor McKee?
Amendment.
Councillor Murray?
Amendment.
Councillor Nicholson?
Amendment.
Councillor Ronnie? Councillor Ronnie? Councillor Stitt?
Amendment.
Councillor Wood?
Motion.
I'll try Councillor Blake. Okay. And Councillor Ronnie.
Tracy, before we draw this to a conclusion, can you give them an opportunity to type a message, please, if they don't respond verbally, in case that's an option for them? Then if no, we'll have to determine the vote on the members that have been able to respond to you. Try both members one more time, please, Tracy, and then we'll determine the motion amendment based on the members that have responded to you.
Okay. Councillor Ian Blake. Councillor Matthew Ronnie. I'll mark them as not present for this item, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tracy.
So the amendment carries 7 votes to 6. So the members have agreed the new priority today for fire safety to ring fence the 20,000 from the remaining discretionary budget, have the eligible criteria set to support the most vulnerable and open it up to organisations excluding landlords, and for the remaining budget to be as per 3.4 in the report.
3.14, Tracy.
3.14, yes, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, members, so we have decided to agree to receive a verbal update from Road Service colleagues to update the 2021 Christmas light contract as detailed in paragraph 3.5, 3.7. That we've decided and delegated to officers. 2.2, agreed to open expressions of interest for the COVID-19 renew and restart budget detailed in paragraph 3.8 to 3.12 and delegate decisions of lead officer, discretionary budget in consultation with local ward members, and agreed to open for expression of interest for the remaining discretionary budget as detailed in paragraph 3.14 with the addition of the 20k. Derek, did you want to speak?
Yes, Chair. Just to advise, we do need to consider the criteria. We're opening up for the remaining £48,000. Now, at the moment, we still need to align that to the priority areas that you've set. So that being your Christmas festivities, your Christmas lights, your floral planting, Remembrance Armed Forces, signature events, key local facilities, sports, twinning and COVID renew restart. So if there was any other things that members thought they wanted to support with that up to £2,000, we do need to set criteria or additional priorities, or if members are happy to go with those existing priorities.
Well, we need to add fire safety, and I'm glad you brought that to our attention, Derek, because that would address the 20k. And I think we have already had a seminar which doesn't make decisions, but then we had a discussion in June whereby we did decide to set the criteria. So I'd be very surprised if members wanted to add to that other than the fire safety with a ring fence 20k. But I'm open to members. If any members have any other suggestions or matters they wish to add, please let us know. But we did have a seminar for a discussion, and then we did decide in June. So I'd be surprised if there was any change in the short time scale between June and now. Okay, so Derek, just confirm for members that we are about to add to our criteria fire safety installations with a ring fence budget, and all other criteria remains the same. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Okay, and Tracy, you have a record of that, please?
Yes, Chair, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, now members, that's the decision. We're happy to agree all of these recommendations as set out with the addition of the 20k. Thanks very much, members, and thanks for the opportunity to deliberate that particular agenda item. We're going to agenda item 7. I will shut off the camera and I will not participate in agenda item 7, but I'll wait to be recalled.
Thank you, members. I'll take over from here. Item number 7, Nithsdale Area Committee Tackling Poverty and Inequalities Budget 2021-22 applications for funding. Now, firstly, members would have received an update last week on a clerical error identified at recommendation 2.4 where the remaining balance should have been detailed as £25,026.38. Now, this report asks members to consider and agree applications to the Area Committee Tackling Poverty and Inequalities budget for 21-22. And I'm sure all members will join with me in giving our thanks to all organisations operating across Nithsdale and indeed the wider region during the past 18 months, and in particular, which has brought into sharp focus the fantastic community and voluntary effort, which is much needed and appreciated. In addition, members, I'm sure you will also like to join with me in giving our thanks to the scoring panel, who on our behalf have scrutinised the applications and supporting documentation in line with our agreed criteria and framework in order to make the recommendations before us today. And I'd like to pass on the thanks to the thanks of this committee to those panel members who joined council officers from external organisations to ensure the process was robust, transparent and well considered. However, as we're aware, it's entirely a matter of members to determine the final allocations. Now, Derek Hexel's here to assist members with our discussions. Now, Derek, do you have anything that you wish to add?
Just my apologies for that clerical error, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Okay, I'll put it out to members, but I'd like to ask if members wish to take Table 1, the allocations as a bulk, or to go through applications one at a time to discuss them, but also to discuss the remaining balance. Leader, you wish to speak?
Yes, just before we get on to that, and I just ask a more general question about the scoring. Two organisations, Lockerbridge Village Hall and Dumfries Galloway Citizens Advice, were scored -5 for their match funding. That seemed a bit harsh to me, actually, that they got a negative score when other organisations, because both organisations had their own funds, and it seemed a bit harsh that they were getting -5 when other organisations with their own funds were maybe getting 5. If there was little, I just wondered why it was a negative. Why wasn't it just 0? Or were they actually supposed to be getting 5? Why did they get a -5 for that?
Through you, Chair, the scoring framework set up to support organisations requesting 50% or less as per the criteria that was agreed by Nithsdale Area Committee. The framework does allow for organisations to request up to 99%, but when you start requesting over 50%, you lose points. So for organisations requesting between 51 and 75% of their cost, they would get -1. And the two organisations you referred to, Leader, they were requesting between 76 and 99% of the costs from this budget. So they were awarded a -5.
Okay, thanks for the explanation. Thank you.
So do members have an opinion on how you would like to do this? Whether you want to do it one at a time, these different applications, or just take it as a bulk?
Quite happy to take it as a bulk.
I'm quite happy with that as well, Trey.
I'm
happy to agree.
Well.
Yep.
Agree.
Okay, then. So if anyone's otherwise minded, no. Councillor McKee, you wish to speak?
Sorry, I've spoken, but I can't get my hand in. Sorry. By the way. Sorry, Chair.
So I'm open to any discussions, questions, or whatever about the actual Table 1 and the awards. Anyone have anything to ask or discuss? Councillor Campbell?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to go with the recommendations as set out in the report.
What, you're happy to go with the recommendations as is the panel scoring, you meaning? Because we still to determine what we're going to do with the remainder.
Yeah, just as you said, the panel scoring, I'm happy to go along with that. I'll leave it for other members. I've got no position what we do with the remainder, but I'll leave it for other members if they wish to come in, what they want to do with that. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Campbell. I'm not sure who was first. I think it was Councillor Lever.
Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, I'm happy with the recommendations, and also to reopening the small grant awards until the fund is fully committed. I think we need to spend the money this year rather than just carrying it over to subsequent years.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Councillor McKee?
If Councillor Lever's just consider put forward a motion, I'm quite happy to second that. I think we should reopen the applications and try and use all this money this year. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McKee. So far we're considering opening for small scale grants awards until the fund's fully committed. Is that right? Is that what we're suggesting?
Yep.
Yeah, agreed.
Anyone else otherwise minded? All members happy with that?
Agreed.
Gosh, that was pretty easy.
Chair, can we just clarify what the upper budget, if that's what we're going for, if that's what we're agreeing, just what the upper budget would be for the small scale grants?
Does anyone have? I mean, I'm not.
Could I suggest £2,000?
I think that's
agreed.
I would maybe even suggest 5,000. Councillor Lever's willing to go with that, but if you want to stick at 2,000, that's fine.
Quite happy with 2,000, Chair.
2,000's fine.
2,000 sounds good. If you go up to 5,000, does criteria change? Is there extra things we have to add, caveats that we have to add to that?
There's a bit additional risk to the council when you go a bit higher for delegation. I would, I think £2,000 would be appropriate, but it's completely up to members. We can put things in place if members wish it up to 5,000. Normally it's when you go up to about £10,000, we start needing a lead officer, etc. And there's additional paperwork that applicants need to do. But for the simple process of expression of interest, looking at if we are looking at local delegation to the lead officer and ward members, then £2,000 would be appropriate.
I'm quite happy to go with that, Chair.
Yeah. Anyone else have anything else they'd like to add, or any sort of recommendations? No, 2,000 fine. Open up for until it's all gone.
Agreed.
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 So we just go to recommendations then. One, note that £85,340 is available for distribution by Nithsdale Area Committee from the Tackling Poverty and Inequalities budget as set out in paragraph 3.1. Number two, note the Nithsdale Area Committee eligibility, priorities and criteria contained in Appendix 1. 3. Consider the application summaries contained in Appendix 2 and the scoring panel's recommendations as set out in Table 1 and agree allocations as appropriate. And finally, subject to decisions at 2.3, note the remaining balance of £25,026.38. We've agreed to put that back out, and whatever how that wording be, Derek?
So we're looking to open a small grant process using expression of interest for awards of up to £2,000 and delegate decisions to the lead officer in consultation with ward members.
Yeah, everyone happy with that?
Agreed.
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 Anyone want to tap Jim on the shoulder to bring him back?
Thanks very much, Tracy. Well done. Thank you. Hey, thanks, Derek, for you being here today. That was great.
Thanks, Jim.
Members, we go into agenda item number 8, disposal of land at Brandyburn, Algarth, report by Head of Economy and Development. Our next report is regarding disposal of land at Brandyburn in Algarth, which has been declared surplus to council requirements. A number of community groups have been consulted in this disposal, and Andrew Maxwell is on Teams to answer any members' questions. Morning, Andrew. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Members, please remember this is not a debate on the disposal. This is simply a question as to whether or no we have consulted the appropriate number of community groups in Algarth. They're listed in the report. Members have any questions for Derek on this report? Derek, Andrew even. Councillor McKee, are you wanting to speak, or is that the last item?
I haven't got my hand up here, Chair, so I don't know how you've done it.
It's on Teams, but it's maybe for the last.
That's what you get for going away. If you behave yourself. No, I don't want to speak, Chair.
Okay, Andrew, it seems there are no questions for you, so thanks for joining us today.
Okay.
We're asked to note that some 0.81 acres of land at Brandyburn near Algarth is surplus to council requirements. It's in the appendix. It's featured in the appendix. Note that community councils and groups listed at paragraph 3.5 in this report have been consulted with regard to potential community uses, and advise if there are any further groups members wish to consult with regards to potential community use. The answer seems to be no. You've done well, Andrew. Thanks very much to being here.
Thank you, Chair.
And that concludes agenda item 8. Thanks very much, Andrew. Take care.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye. We move on to agenda item number 9. Our next report asks us to consider objections to a traffic regulation order in Trequeer Road, Dumfries. We've been asked to consider the objection received, which is in Appendix 2 in your reports. And Tony Topping is in Teams to answer any members' questions. Tony, good morning. Good to see you as well. Nice to see you. Thanks, Tony.
Morning.
Members, any questions for Tony on this report? The objections are contained within the report, and Tony's response is also contained within the report. So I'm open to members. If there are no questions for Tony, we'll move on to the recommendations. We are asked to consider the objection received, and it's featured in Appendix 2. We are asked to consider the responses to the objections in Appendices 3 and 4. We're asked to note the further correspondence received after the order advertising period in Appendix 5. And we are asked to agree to the implementation of the waiting restrictions traffic regulation order 2021 as advertised, and that features in Appendix 1. Members, if you're happy to go with the recommendations, Tracy, can you just confirm what the decision of the committee is, please?
Thanks, Chair. Members have agreed in petition of the Traffic Regulation Officer have advertised in the appendix.
Thank you very much. We move on, members, to agenda item number 10. U772N Hill Street and U proposed waiting restrictions, traffic regulation order 2021, report by Head of Roads and Infrastructure. Our next report asks us to consider the objections to a traffic regulation order on Hill Street and Rosemount Street, Dumfries. Again, the objection received is detailed in Appendix 2 of the report, and Tony Topping is still with us on Teams to answer any members' questions. Any members have any questions for Tony in respect of his report on agenda item 10?
If I could just comment, Chair, I don't know why these restrictions have never been in place before, because there's always an issue when you're coming out of a road end where the visibility screen is important. And if these parking areas, if cars have been parking right up to the corners, it's been dangerous for any traffic going through, coming out of these side roads. So I totally agree with what's proposed.
Thank you for that, Councillor McKee. If there are no other questions for, well, that wasn't a question, Tony, that was an observation in support of your proposal here. So members are asked to consider the objection received in Appendix 2. Consider the responses to the objection in Appendices 3 and 4. Note the further correspondence received after the order advertising period in Appendix 5. And agree to the implementation of the waiting restrictions traffic regulation order 2021 as advertised, and it features in Appendix 1. Tracy, again, confirm the decision of the committee, please.
Chair, yes, members have agreed the implementation of the weight and restrictions traffic regulation order as advertised in Appendix 1.
Many thanks for joining us, Tony. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you.
Move on to agenda item number 11, road network management street naming development at former Interflow factory, Edinburgh Road, Dumfries. Our next report asks us to agree Arrow Crescent and Arrow Place as the preferred names for the new roads. Kevin Morrison is on Teams to answer any members' questions. Morning, Kevin. Good to see you.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, Chair.
Morning. Members, any questions for Kevin?
Quite happy to agree the recommendations, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor McKee. In the absence of any questions for Kevin, we're asked to agree Arrow Crescent, Arrow Place as the preferred names for the new roads associated with the development. That's agreed, members. Thank you very much. We move on to agenda item number 12. Road network management street naming development at Craigsloyd, Dumfries. Consider the naming of the new road being formed at the above development as per the attached plan in the appendix. Our report asks us to agree Moss Loaning as the preferred name for the new road. Kevin is still on Teams for any questions members might have. Councillor Martin?
Oh, I've no problem with the name. I'm just wondering what the significance of Moss Loaning is in that area.
Kevin?
Do you know what? That's something that evades me. It was just something that was promoted by the developer. I don't know the actual significance myself, unfortunately.
I've no problem. I was just wondering what the significance was because I just can't think of any. That's fine, Kevin.
Thanks for that. Councillor Little? Robert?
Just answering Councillor Martin. I think there's quite a few mosses around Georgetown Way, and it's near there. We've got Moss Vale and stuff. I think we've got a Moss View, and we've got a lot of different mosses. So I think it's probably just adding to that.
Yeah.
I quite understand that, Tracy, because I stayed there for 35 years.
Okay, these were just observations, Kevin. I take it that members are content to approve the street naming as proposed by our officer. That's a decision. Members are asked to agree Moss Loaning is the preferred name for the new road associated with this development, decided as that's appropriate. Thanks very much for being with us, Kevin. Nice to see you. Thanks again.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Chair. Bye.
Members, there is no other business. This concludes today's business, and our next meeting will take place on Wednesday, 10th of November 2021. Thank you all for your attendance today and your input. Nice to see you all. Catch up again soon. Thanks very much, folks.